Fear is what drives us. It ends up putting us in a situation where we're choosing options for us based out of fear instead of based out of power. And so what I do, of course, is I teach you how to plan your birth from a place of power instead of a place of fear. Why? Because oftentimes what happens is that when you're making those decisions out of fear, you're not making the decision that's actually right for you. You're making a decision that is coming from a place where you may not even have all the information that you need in order to make that decision. For example, induction is a big one. Oftentimes I'm seeing that what is being said inside the mom groups is, well, it's better to induce at 39 weeks because you can avoid a C-section. Not exactly true, but the fear of wanting to avoid that C-section may push you into an induction that you don't want, specifically because you think that if you don't induce at 39 weeks, that you will more likely have a C-section. The truth is a little bit more insidious than that, because if you are a first-time mom, especially, or if you've never had a vaginal birth and you're only having cesareans and then you're trying for a VBAC, if you go and induce at 39 weeks and you happen to be a 42-week mama or a 41-week mama, your baby's not actually ready to be born. You really don't want to induce until your baby is ready to be born, and that by that point you don't need to induce. If you have a medical complication, that's different. But if we're just talking due dates and possibility of a big baby or possibility of inducing to avoid a cesarean, it doesn't make sense, because if you're doing that and you're saying, well, I'm going to induce to avoid a cesarean, more likely what's going to happen is you're going to induce, it's not going to work, and you're going to end up with a C-section. Same thing for vaginal exams. It's like, I'm going to have this cervical check because I'm more likely to find out if I'm going to go into labor on my own. Well, there's a whole bunch of problems that can come with that, and I don't have enough time to get into that. But if you have been following me for a while, then you know I was a first-time mom. I was absolutely terrified of childbirth. We're talking to the point where I would sit there and I would watch a childbirth scene on TV and I would be cringing and I would be clenching my legs together and I would be begging for the scary part to be over, the scary part being birth. Why? Well, I'll tell you that in a minute. But first, I promise that over the next 5 days, you're going to get out of your birth fear. This is a bold promise. And I know that a lot of people will say, oh, well, you can't really get over childbirth fear. It's just birth is scary. Birth is unpredictable. You need to throw your birth plan out the window. No, I am actually going to help you get out of your birth fear, just as I have helped my clients over the last year and a half get past theirs. And just as I've helped women beforehand when I was a birth advocate get out of their fear and plan empowered births. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And I'm going to tell you the same framework that I ended up using in order to get myself out of my birth fear and be able to go on to have 2 natural births, one in the hospital, which I had a little bit of fear come up, and I was thinking to myself, you know, I just have to do this to be safe, even though I don't want to. I'll tell you a little bit more about that story on day 3 when I talk about how staying in your fear can get you stuck. But I went on to then have a home birth with my daughter. And as you can see behind me, that's little Michaela. She is not that tiny anymore. And she is my empowered birth baby. She is the reason why I do this work now. Because once I had that physiological birth, and once I learned how to release my fears and be able to plan my birth from a place of power instead of a place of fear, that's when things started to change for me. Not only in birth and parenting, but in all aspects of my life. Because on the other side of fear is the thing you want. So if you're staying scared of childbirth, the thing on the other side, of course, is you want to have an empowered birth. If you're already pregnant, this is so true for you. You can continue to stay stuck in your fear, or you can release those fears and be able to better identify them. So when they come up, they can't stop you. You might just look at it like, oh yeah, there's that thing that I'm afraid of again. And I'm going to go do this thing anyway, because I'm not going to let my fear control me. So that's my actual promise to you, is that by the end of this 5-day training, If you have done the work, if you have taken the time to do the exercises at the end of every single one of these trainings, if you play full out, you will have a better framework for getting past any fear that you have in childbirth, and you will be able to take the same framework into other aspects of your life, including your parenting, or if you have fears around how you're going to discipline your children. All of these things can come up. And the thing is that motherhood can be pretty scary. And that's because we've been taught that motherhood is scary. But that's just one idea, and it's not reality. The truth is that you are your thoughts and your actions and your beliefs, and you can shift those. So how did I come into this? Okay, well, first of all, you need to know a little bit about my backstory. Before I was a mom, I was very much into psychology. So I studied all the social psychology textbooks, and my dad was in social psychology and also psychiatric nursing from the time that I was 11 years old until we shared a campus together in college. And in that time, when I was 11 years old, I fell in love with psychology, and I really loved how our brains worked. So I've sort of developed this based on the frameworks of what I learned from social psychology, and also I am an empowerment coach. Okay, so today is day one, and day one we're going to talk about why childbirth is absolutely the most frightening thing. Like, why are we so scared? Well, the first thing you need to know is that the easiest way to control somebody is through fear. And the maternity care system operates on the basis that you are afraid. The entire maternity system only exists because you are afraid. And if you were no longer afraid and you were making decisions for themselves, that whole system cannot function the way it is. So currently, what am I talking about when I say that the system is functioning a certain way? Well, the way that we have maternity care is it's very one size fits all, which means that you go into the appointments and they go a certain way, and you're told by your care provider, now you need to take this test, now you need to go and do this procedure, now we're going to do a vaginal exam, now we're going to do a pap smear. And at some point during that, when you start to feel uncomfortable or you say, I don't want vaginal exams, they will then tell you, well, if you can't handle vaginal exams, you can't have a natural birth. You won't be able to handle the pain. Well, first of all, that's undermining your confidence. And second of all, it's a bunch of crap, because you can actually have a natural birth without a single vaginal exam. Or if they say, well, if you can't stand to do these tests, then you're not doing what's best for your baby and you're not going to be a good mother, that's again putting fear on you based on the fact that what their ultimate goal is to get you to comply. So all of this fear is not in your best interest. It's more because they have their own agenda when it comes to your birth. Your care provider has been indoctrinated into the system. They may be a pretty good person. They may not actually have bad intentions when it comes to pushing you into these interventions. Maybe they've seen things in the hospital system. It's quite common that birth goes wrong in a hospital system because it's so heavily interfered with. If you want to know more about that, you can read Reclaiming Childbirth as a Rite of Passage, because this book by Rachel Reed actually goes into the details of how a physiological birth works. I myself have also studied physiological birth over the last 9 years. I prepared extensively before I had my daughter, because after what had happened with my son, when I chose out of fear instead of from a place of power, I decided that's it. I am not going to let the system control me ever again. I am not going to let them scare me out of what I want. I want a home birth, and I'm going to get one, and I'm not going to let anything stop me. And so when this happened, I had to relearn my education. So how did I do that? Okay, so I have 5 pillars of empowerment. And the 5 pillars of empowerment are as follows. You need to have the right mindset. You need to have the right education. You need to have the right environment. You need to have the right facilitators, and you need to have the right support. If you don't have those things, if you don't have the right support, first of all, People are going to continue to undermine your confidence. They're going to continue to put their fears on you if you don't have the right support. If you don't have the right facilitators, again, those care providers are going to continue to try to control you through fear because they are afraid. They don't trust you to be the decision maker in your care. If you don't have the right environment, again, that's not facilitating what you need to feel safe. So if you're not learning in the right environment, if you're not birthing in the right environment, then what happens is that things can't come to pass. You cannot birth in an environment where you feel unsafe because your body is going to tell you, there's a tiger chasing us right now. It's really not a good idea for us to be going into labor. And then your labor will stall. And then because you're in the environment where they control things, the system will then start to decide how your birth needs to progress. And they will start giving you Pitocin, or they will push you into a C-section. This is what happens when you are not in the right environment. Now, in order to get that, you need to have the right education. Because if you don't understand how your body actually works, and you don't understand how your mind works, and you don't understand all of the nuances that are involved in birth and in our biological processes, and you don't understand how the system works, and you don't understand the historical context, and you don't understand how to get the thing you want, it's not going to work too well. Because the second something comes up where they're like, well, why are you refusing that? And you say, well, I don't know. I was just told that this is something I need to refuse. Now they can go and put their fears on you and tell you why they think you should do the thing that you don't actually want. This is also called coercion, and it's not okay. And it happens a lot in maternity care because of the fact that we are in a culture of fear. So the next one, this is the big key component, and this is where the get out of your birth fear in 5 days challenge really comes into play. And that is the right mindset. A friend of mine who is also in the virtual coach community, and he's the host of the virtual coach community, has said that 90% of the game is played above the shoulders. And when he said that, I understood it so fully because I had already had my empowered birth with my daughter. And I'm like, you're right, because once I got that mindset under control, I was able to get out of my fear, and I was then able to push forward and go into that unknown space to get the thing that I really wanted. Now, if I had stuck with that fear, I may have just ended up giving in to what the midwife wanted me to do, which was transfer to the hospital because I was not progressing at the rate that I was supposed to as a second-time mom. And this is the same thing that keeps a lot of us stuck, especially if we don't have the right doula or the right midwife, and if we're at home and we think, I need to transfer, I can't handle this anymore. Well, if you don't have that mindset figured out that this is just, I'm done this contraction and now I can move forward, or I'm scared and I can move forward, and you understand that and you've worked through those issues before so that when they come up, it's very quick and instant and it doesn't keep you stuck. When you don't have that right mindset, it all falls apart. You can't get the right education without the right mindset. You can't get the right environment without the right mindset. You can't get the right facilitators, your care providers, your doulas, your midwives. You can't get them if you don't have your right mindset, because now you're still looking at them as the experts who know more than you rather than somebody you've hired to support you. You can't get the right support if you don't have your mindset, because if you are being told by your friends and family over and over that birth is scary, birth is traumatic, that you need to lower your expectations, and you keep getting that and you have nowhere else to go for that support for what you really need, then eventually that starts to erode your confidence, and then you start to doubt yourself. So you need to have your right mindset, and you need all 5 of these pillars in order for you to have an empowered birth. And this is true for everything. This is why I call them the 5 pillars of empowerment, because you need these 5 pillars of support for everything that you try to do, whether it's trying to build a business, trying to get out of a relationship that's not serving you, parenting your children. Everything comes back down to these 5 pillars. They are that important. And once I discovered this, once I realized that these were the 5 things that make or break your birth, then I realized that I needed to tell everybody about this. And this is when I took this out into the world as a birth advocate and started teaching it to my clients and the women who came to me for help in a volunteer sense. And I noticed that once they had those things, they were able to go on and have those empowered births. So as I said, we're going to get you out of your birth fear today. And the fact is that your care provider is putting fear on you, your family and friends are putting fear on you, society is putting fear on you. And the whole idea is that you become pregnant and then you're told nothing about the actual process, or you're told the wrong things about the actual process. So you may be told that dilation, you have to get to 10 centimeters. But if you have only that model of information to use, then if you're not dilating to 10 centimeters, 1 centimeter per hour, you'll start to think to yourself, my body must be broken. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Or say you're like me and you were absolutely terrified of the thought of tearing. And then people say, well, it's either a tear or an episiotomy. And the episiotomy, of course, is they cut you. So you can either be cut and it'll be easier for the doctor to sew you up, or you can tear and it's going to be harder to sew you up properly and you'll be ruined. So those two paradigms that you're being told, they both sound pretty scary. But now you're choosing between the lesser of two evils. And what I did in that sense is I would go and Google, how do I avoid tearing? And I got a whole bunch of information on how to do it, but it was all contradictory. So some of them was perineal massage. Some of it said that you have a water birth, and others said that if you have a water birth, you're more likely to tear. Some said if you're on your back, you're less likely to tear. Some said if you are on your back, you're likely to tear. And you can't figure out which information to listen to. And here's the secret. You want to listen to your body. You're more likely to tear if you're following what somebody else is telling you to do rather than your own instincts. And our instincts are very powerful. So sometimes with tearing is that I've seen that some women will actually close their legs and they'll have their knees close together, but then like opened apart, like it's a different position. And then there'll be a midwife that says, oh no, you need to open your legs more so that the baby can come out. But the fact is that your body is instinctively saying, no, we need to close down on this one, and then we'll open on the next one, and close down on this one, and open on the next one. And we'll shift our bodies to accommodate what is going on, because our bodies are very smart. But when you have that outside influence, and you've also been taught over and over that you don't know anything because you're a first-time mom, or you don't know anything because you've only had cesareans, so you don't know what a vaginal birth is actually like, or you don't know anything because you've never had a home birth and you don't know what you're in for, like that is in itself undermining your confidence in yourself. Because the truth is that even if you were in the middle of nowhere, eventually your baby would be born, because your body is designed to birth. And if there was a complication, you would also be able to instinctively tune in and be like, something's off. I need some help. And then be able to figure out what you need. Assuming, of course, that you do what I'm going to tell you to do in the next part of this. So as I said, we're going to be doing an exercise. And the exercise is to help you identify these fears. Because one thing that I've learned in coaching and personal development and in the psychology framework is that we have fears that stop us. They're called limiting beliefs in the personal development sphere. And it's also having to do with those stories that you're telling yourself. Those stories about whether or not you can actually have an empowered birth, or if you secretly think that it's only luck that's going to get you there. So what I want you to do is I want you to take out a piece of paper, and I want you to start writing down all of those fears and all of those stories that you've been telling yourself. Maybe that you think that you're going to tear. Maybe that you think that if you have a home birth, that something's going to go wrong. Maybe you have a fear that it's going to be super painful and you won't be able to handle the pain. Maybe you have a fear that you're going to just end up with a C-section because your mom had a C-section and your sister had a C-section and your cousins had C-sections. And so it's C-sections run in my family, so therefore I'm going to have a C-section. Or maybe it's, I have really narrow little hips and there's no way I'm going to be able to push a baby out. Or it's, I'm a first-time mom and I don't know anything, so I should probably just listen to the doctors. Or maybe it's, you know, I've just had 3 C-sections and I just don't think that my body is capable of having a baby because I was induced with my first and I wasn't able to have that natural birth because my body doesn't go into labor. And then I was induced with my second and same thing, C-section again. And then my third, I can't have another baby. I can't have a vaginal birth. I have to have a C-section. It's too dangerous for me if I go and have a vaginal birth. And the fact is, I have a friend who has had 3 C-sections and 1 vaginal birth afterwards. So she had a vaginal birth after 3 cesareans. And I've helped moms who have had a vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. And I continue to help moms, even though I myself have never had a C-section, this seems to be something that I can help them with. And they go on to have these amazing vaginal births, oftentimes at home. And they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that my body is capable of this. And it turns out that what was really stopping them was fear. So again, you're going to want to write down all of your fears and all of your limiting beliefs on what you think your body is capable of. And tomorrow, what we're going to do is we're going to identify where those fears come from. Okay, so that's your homework for today. It's nice and quick and easy. You're just going to take out a piece of paper. You're going to write down your limiting beliefs about what you think you're actually capable of with your body and birthing. And all of those things that have scared the crap out of you about childbirth, you're going to write them all down. And I will tell you why you're doing this tomorrow. All right, I will see you soon. Bye.